My girlfriend forgot to hang up. What I overheard exposed her lies and ended our relationship. Hello, read it. Betrayal doesn't just happen in a single moment. It's not always a dramatic revelation, not always an explosive confrontation. Sometimes it's slow and quiet, creeping in unnoticed until one day, you wake up and realize the life you thought you were living was a lie. That the person you trusted had been slipping away for a long time, and you had been too blind or too trusting to see it. My name is Ryan, and I'm 27 years old. I never thought I would be the kind of person who got cheated on. Maybe that was naive, maybe it was arrogance, or maybe I just truly believe that when two people love each other, things like that don't happen. When I met Jessica, I had no doubt in my mind that she was the one. I remember the exact moment I saw her for the first time. It was at a mutual friend's party, one of those big, crowded house gatherings where everyone seemed to know each other except me. I wasn't the type to stand out in those environments. I was always the guy in the background, sipping my drink, nodding along to conversations, but never the loudest voice in the room. But Jessica was different. She had this energy about her, the kind of presence that demanded attention without her even trying. She walked into the room like she belonged there, like the world was something she could mold to her liking, and people just gravitated toward her. She wasn't loud or obnoxious, but she was effortlessly charming, always knowing the right thing to say to make people laugh, always at the center of attention without seeming like she needed it. I was drawn to her immediately. I wasn't the only one. Guys circled her like moths to a flame, hanging on her every word, laughing a little too hard at her jokes, looking for any excuse to be close to her. But what made Jessica different, what made her dangerous, was that she knew exactly what she was doing, and she loved it. She had a way of making every guy think he had a chance, that he was the one she was really paying attention to. She would brush their arm when she laughed, tilt her head just slightly when she listened, hold eye contact just long enough to make them feel special before moving on to the next conversation. It was a skill, and she was a master at it. I should have known then. But when she turned that attention on me, when she looked at me like I was the only one in the room, I let myself believe I was different. We talked that night for hours. At first, I was just another name in a long list of guys trying to capture even a fraction of her attention. But as the night went on, something shifted. She started asking me real questions, leaning in closer, laughing at my jokes. Not in that way she laughed at everyone else's, but in a way that felt real. And for a moment, I thought maybe I had been wrong about her. Maybe she wasn't just playing a game. Maybe she saw something in me that was different from the rest. By the end of the night, she was the one who asked for my number. I should have taken that as a sign, but I didn't. I fell hard and fast. Jessica had that effect on people. She made you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she was with you. Every text, every late-night conversation, every inside joke felt like a secret only the two of us shared. The honeymoon phase was intoxicating. For the first few months, everything was perfect. We spent every moment we could together, going on spontaneous road trips, staying up late talking about our futures, making promises that felt unbreakable. She was unpredictable, full of life. And when she loved you, it felt like standing in the warmth of the sun. But the thing about the sun? Stay in it too long, and you get burned. The first cracks started to show early on, but I ignored them. Jessica was naturally flirtatious. She would bat her eyelashes at waiters, playfully tease mutual friends, let conversations with guys linger just a little too long. But every time I brought it up, she would laugh it off, telling me I was overthinking things, that she couldn't help that people liked her. She never made me feel like I had the right to be upset. And so, I let it go. I told myself it was just her personality, that she chose me at the end of the day, and that was all that mattered. But little by little, she started pulling away. At first, it was small things. The way she would glance at her phone and quickly turn it over when I sat next to her. The night she would go out with friends and forget to text me until hours later. The inside jokes she had with people I didn't know, the way she would change the subject when I asked about them. Then it became bigger things. The way she would make plans without telling me, how she started going to parties alone, how she would come home late smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. The fight started. I would ask her why she never invited me to these outings anymore. She would roll her eyes and tell me I was being controlling. I I would ask her why she was being so secretive with her phone. She would tell me I was paranoid. I would ask her if there was someone else, and she would laugh, like the idea was so ridiculous that it wasn't even worth addressing. And every time, she made me feel like I was the problem. So I stopped asking. I told myself that if I just gave her space, if I just trusted her the way she always told me I should, things would go back to the way they were. But trust only works when both people respect it. I ignored the signs for too long. And then, one night, she made a mistake. It was late when my phone rang. Jessica's name flashed across my screen, and I answered without thinking. I had been lying in bed, half asleep, expecting to hear her voice, maybe a drunken, "I love you" after a night out with her friends. But instead, there was no greeting, just muffled noise, laughter, music in the background, and then her voice. Light, teasing, playful in a way I hadn't heard in months. And then his voice. A man's voice. Something inside me went cold. I almost hung up, assuming it was a pocket dial. But then I heard it, the unmistakable flirtation in her tone. The way she giggled, leaned in closer, let her words linger. And then, the worst part, she told him she wasn't really seeing anyone serious. 3 years. 3 years of my life. And that was what I had been reduced to, nothing serious. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. And I kept listening, because some part of me already knew what was coming next. And I needed to hear it for myself. Betrayal has a sound. It's laughter that isn't meant for you. It's whispered words in the dark. It's the unmistakable flirtation in someone's voice when they think you aren't listening. That night, as I lay in bed gripping my phone, I heard everything. Jessica had pocket-dialed me. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a random accident, something meaningless. But the longer I listened, the more I realized what I was hearing wasn't just background noise. It was her, laughing, flirting, talking to another guy in a way she hadn't spoken to me in a long time. I stayed quiet. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed undeniable proof. Maybe I was waiting for her to mention my name, to hear her say something, anything, that would explain why she was acting like a single woman. But she never did. She told him she wasn't really seeing anyone serious. 3 years. 3 years of my life, reduced to nothing serious. I clenched my jaw, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced through every moment of our relationship, every excuse she had given me, every doubt I had pushed away. And then, just as I was processing the full weight of what I was hearing, she realized it. The pause, the sudden rustling of fabric. Then, her voice, sharper now, panicked. She had seen the call. The line went dead. The silence that followed was suffocating. The room around me felt smaller, as if the walls were pressing in. My phone buzzed almost instantly. Jessica was calling me back, over and over. I didn't answer. I let her sit in her panic the same way I had been sitting in my realization that everything I thought we had was a lie. The text came next. "Ryan, I am so sorry. Please pick up. I need to explain. It's not what it sounded like. Please, I'm freaking out. Call me back." I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, watching as more messages flooded in, each one more desperate than the last. It was almost amusing in a twisted way. She hadn't been thinking about me at all when she was flirting with him. But now that she had been caught, now she was panicking. I got out of bed, pacing the room, my mind whirling. I had been suspicious for months, but I had never had anything concrete. Jessica had always been careful, always manipulative enough to make me feel like my concerns were just insecurities. But this was undeniable. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of begging for an explanation. I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this like she always did. Instead, I made a decision. She had made me feel like an option for months. Now, she was about to find out what it felt like to be one. I grabbed a duffel bag and started packing. Clothes, essentials, anything I needed. This was our apartment, but I didn't want to be here when she got back. I wasn't going to give her the chance to spin some lie, to look me in the eye and swear that it wasn't what I thought it was. I wasn't going to sit here and wait for her to come home, acting like this was something we could talk through. By the time I was done, my phone was still buzzing. I ignored it. I had one more thing to do before I left. I walked into the living room, where Jessica kept the framed pictures of us on the shelf. There were so many of them, pictures from vacations, from parties, from nights out with friends. A perfectly curated timeline of a relationship that, as it turned out, had meant a lot more to me than it ever had to her. I took them all down. Every last one. I wasn't going to break them, wasn't going to throw them in the trash. That would have required effort, and I wasn't wasting another second of my energy on her. Instead, I placed them all face down on the coffee table, one by one, until there was no trace of us left in the apartment. Then I picked up my bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out. As I drove away, my phone kept buzzing on the passenger seat. I didn't need to look at it to know who it was. Jessica had spent months making me feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of her full attention, like she was always searching for something better. But now, for the first time, she was the one being ignored. And I had never felt better. The drive away from that apartment felt surreal. The road stretched endlessly ahead, the city lights flickered past, and yet, I wasn't really seeing any of it. My body was going through the motions, hands gripping the wheel, foot pressing the gas, eyes fixed on the road, but my mind was stuck in an endless loop, replaying the last few hours over and over again. Every laugh, every flirtatious remark, every moment of that conversation that I was never meant to hear echoed in my head like a broken record. Jessica's words rang louder than anything else. The way she had so easily dismissed our relationship, reducing 3 years of love and loyalty to nothing serious, burned deeper than I had expected. I had never thought I was naive. I had always considered myself level-headed, perceptive, someone who could tell when something wasn't right. And yet I had been fooled, not just by her words, but by the version of her I had convinced myself was real. For months, I had sensed the distance growing between us. It hadn't been abrupt, nothing obvious that would have set off alarms, but it had been there. The slow withdrawal of affection, the small moments of hesitation when she said she loved me, the way she had started treating our time together like an obligation instead of something she actually wanted. And yet, I had convinced myself it was just a phase, that relationships go through ups and downs, that if I just gave her space, things would go back to how they used to be. I had been so wrong. Jessica hadn't been conflicted. She hadn't been struggling with feelings or needing time to figure things out. She had already decided. She had been pulling away from me while moving towards someone else, waiting for the right moment to step fully into a new relationship before officially ending ours. And she would have gotten away with it, too. If she hadn't pocket-dialed me, if I hadn't been lying awake at the exact moment my phone rang, I would have never known. I wondered how long she had planned on keeping me around. Had she been waiting for me to catch her? Had she been hoping I'd get frustrated enough to break things off first, so she wouldn't have to be the bad guy? Or had she wanted me there as a backup, just in case things with him didn't work out? The thought made my stomach twist. I tightened my grip on the wheel, forcing myself to focus on the road ahead. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to go. The idea of staying in that apartment, of sitting in the silence of a home that no longer felt like mine, made me feel sick. Jessica was going to come home and find me gone. She was going to walk through that door expecting everything to be exactly the same, only to realize that for the first time, she had no control over the outcome. For so long, she had made me feel like I was lucky to be with her, like I was the one who needed to prove my worth, to fight for her attention, to constantly remind her that I was good enough. But none of that had been real. It had all been a game. One where she set the rules, controlled the pace, and decided how much of herself she was willing to give. But now, for the first time, she wasn't in control anymore. After what felt like an eternity, I found myself pulling into the driveway of my sister Emily's house. The neighborhood was quiet, the glow of porch lights casting long shadows on the pavement. I hadn't even realized I was coming here until I saw the familiar outline of her home in front of me. Emily had always been the one person who could see through Jessica's charm. She had never liked her, though she had never outright said it. Instead, she had watched from a distance, waiting for the moment I would finally see what she had seen all along. As I sat in the car, staring at the darkened windows of the house, exhaustion hit me all at once. Not just physical exhaustion, but the kind that settled deep into my bones, The kind that came from realizing I had been carrying the weight of something that was never mine to carry in the first place. Jessica had never been the woman I thought she was. She had never been the person I had convinced myself I was building a life with. I had spent 3 years loving someone who had never truly been mine. And now it was over. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and stepped out into the cold night air. The house was silent, but I knew Emily would open the door the second she saw me standing there. She would take one look at my face and know something was wrong. And for the first time, I was ready to admit it. Jessica had broken something in me that I hadn't even realized was fragile. She had taken my trust, my love, my belief in what we had, and tossed it aside like it was disposable. She had spent so long thinking I would never leave. Now, she was going to learn what it felt like to be the one left behind. Morning came too soon. The previous night had been endless, my mind trapped in an exhausting cycle of memories and realizations. Sleep had been restless, broken by flashes of Jessica's laughter, the sound of her voice on that call, the way she had so easily rewritten our relationship as nothing serious. I had spent 3 years believing in something that, in her mind, had already been dismantled long before that moment. By the time I sat up in bed, rubbing the exhaustion from my eyes, I knew what was coming. Jessica had always been someone who thrived on control. She never let things slip too far beyond her grasp. The moment she lost her hold on a situation, she found a way to claw it back, twisting the narrative until she came out looking like the victim. And now that I had taken away her ability to explain, to manipulate the story into something she could manage, she would be scrambling. I reached for my phone and wasn't surprised to see the missed calls. 15 of them. Jessica had spent the night trying to reach me, alternating between voicemails and texts, each more desperate than the last. At first, it had been apologies, carefully worded explanations that made it seem like everything was just a misunderstanding. That was her go-to strategy, calm, collected, easing into a version of the truth that painted her in the best light. But when those didn't get a response, the tone had shifted. The later messages were more frantic, laced with frustration, accusations, demands for me to just listen. I didn't need to. I already knew exactly what she would say. She would tell me that she had too much to drink, that she had just been joking around, that she hadn't meant anything by it. She would try to convince me that I was overreacting, that I had misunderstood the situation, that I needed to trust her. But she had used up every ounce of trust one had left. As I scrolled through her messages, the last one caught my eye. She was on her way to see me. A slow, cold sense of finality settled in. Of course, she wouldn't leave this alone. She wasn't the type to accept consequences. She had convinced herself she could fix this, that if she just talked to me in person, she could somehow undo what had been done. She had no idea that there was nothing left to save. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I stayed seated, staring at the door from across the room, listening as she rang again, then knocked. My hands rested on my knees, fingers tapping lightly against the fabric of my jeans, heartbeat steady. There was no anger anymore, no overwhelming pain, just certainty. She knocked again, more insistent this time, and then finally silence. The quiet stretched, long and expectant, until I heard the shuffle of footsteps moving away. She had come all this way believing she could change my mind, and now she was walking back to her car with nothing. But it wasn't over. Jessica didn't give up easily. For the next few days, she tried everything. She showed up at places she knew I would be. She reached out to mutual friends, trying to get them to talk to me on her behalf. She sent emails, long-winded explanations filled with half-truths and rewritten versions of reality that I knew weren't even meant for me. They were meant for her. A way for her to convince herself that she hadn't actually done anything wrong. That I was the one ruining us by not letting her explain. I ignored it all. The messages kept coming, and as they did, her desperation became clearer. At first, she stuck to the script, apologies, pleas, claims that she had been drinking, and that the whole thing was just a misunderstanding. When those got her nowhere, the excuses started evolving. She tried shifting the blame, saying that I had been distant lately, that I had made her feel unappreciated, as if that somehow justified the way she had so easily dismissed me as nothing serious to another guy. It was classic Jessica. When that failed, she changed tactics again, swinging wildly between anger and self-pity. Some messages were furious, accusing me of acting immature, of blowing things out of proportion. Others were softer, telling me that she missed me, that she was suffering without me, that she couldn't believe I would throw away everything we had over one mistake. But I didn't respond. I had spent too much time letting her dictate how things played out, always giving her the benefit of the doubt, always waiting for her to decide what our relationship meant to her. But this time, she wasn't the one making the choice. Days passed, and the messages started slowing down. When Jessica realized I wasn't going to give in, she did exactly what I had expected her to do. She started rewriting the story. She told our mutual friends that I had abandoned her. She made it seem like I had blindsided her, left her without explanation, refused to hear her out. She framed herself as the heartbroken one, the victim of a misunderstanding, hoping that if she told the story enough times, she could convince everyone, including herself, that it was true. But the people who mattered? They knew better. Emily had been the first one I told after everything had happened. My sister had never liked Jessica, but she had kept that opinion to herself, only ever offering quiet warnings instead of outright disapproval. When I told her what happened, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just nodded, like she had known all along that this was how it would end. Then there were our friends, the ones who had seen Jessica's behavior firsthand, the ones who had noticed the way she had pulled away from me, the ones who had heard the rumors before I had. Not everyone had been blind to what she had been doing. They had just been waiting for me to realize it myself. And now I finally had. Jessica had spent so long believing she could get away with anything, that she could string me along indefinitely while keeping her options open. She had made me feel like I was the one who needed to fight for her attention, to prove my worth, to be grateful that she was with me at all. But she had never expected this. She had never expected me to walk away first. Now, for the first time, she was the one being ignored. And she had no idea what to do with that. Jessica had always believed she could talk her way out of anything. For years, she had controlled the narrative, twisting situations in her favor, convincing people, including me, that things were never as bad as they seemed. But this time, she had lost control. Days turned into a week. The messages slowed, then stopped entirely. At first, I thought she had finally given up, finally accepted that there was nothing left to salvage. But deep down, I knew better. Jessica never surrendered easily. Silence wasn't a sign of defeat. It was a strategy. She was waiting, calculating, figuring out how to play this to her advantage. Then, she made her next move. The first sign that something was off came through mutual friends. People started reaching out, checking in on me, their words careful, hesitant. Some were supportive, confirming that they had seen Jessica's behavior firsthand and understood why I had left. But others were different, more distant, more neutral, as if they weren't sure which side they were supposed to take. And then I heard what she had been telling people. Jessica hadn't just rewritten the story. She had flipped it entirely. She was telling everyone that I had abandoned her, that I had suddenly left without explanation, that she had been blindsided, heartbroken, completely unaware of what she had done wrong. She was painting herself as the victim, the devastated girlfriend who had been left in the wreckage of a relationship she had thought was perfect. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she had already moved on. It wasn't a surprise, not really. Jessica had always needed attention, always needed someone orbiting around her. She was never alone for long. But this wasn't just someone new. It was him, the guy from the phone call, the guy she had been flirting with when she thought I wasn't listening. Jessica wasn't just rewriting the story. She was using him as proof that she had been the one who had been hurt. She made it seem like she had started seeing him only after I had abandoned her, framing it as something that had helped her cope with the heartbreak. It was so calculated, so predictable, that I almost laughed when I found out. Jessica wasn't heartbroken. She was humiliated. She hadn't expected me to walk away so cleanly, so decisively. She had assumed that even if I left, there would be some dramatic fallout. Yelling, arguing, messy fights that she could use to justify whatever she did next. But I hadn't given her any of that. I had disappeared from her life in an instant, leaving her with nothing to react to. And now, she was doing the only thing she knew how to do, rewriting history in a way that made her look like the victim. But there was one problem. Jessica wasn't as careful as she thought she was. She had built her story on the idea that I had left her first, that she had been completely blindsided by my actions. She had told people that she hadn't even seen the breakup coming, that she had thought we were happy, that she had no idea what had gone wrong. But there was proof. She had forgotten one thing, the pocket dial, the call that had started it all. Jessica had always been careful, but she had made a mistake that night. The call had been recorded on my phone's call log. The timestamp was there. And when I checked, I saw something else. A voicemail. At some point during the call, my phone had recorded a fragment of the conversation. Just a few seconds, but enough. Enough to hear her laughing, flirting. Enough to hear her say that she wasn't really seeing anyone serious. Enough to prove that she had been lying to everyone, that she had been with him before I had even walked away. I had everything I needed. I had spent too long being made to feel like I was crazy, like I was the one who had to question reality. Now, for the first time, I had undeniable proof that Jessica had never been the person she had pretended to be. And she was about to find out that she had lost the one thing she had always counted on, control over the narrative. Jessica had spent years perfecting the art of manipulation. She knew how to twist words, how to control the way people saw her, how to turn any situation in her favor. It wasn't just something she did, it was who she was, and for a long time it had worked. She had convinced me, and everyone around her, that she was the perfect girlfriend, the charming, outgoing, too-good-for-drama kind of person. And when she got caught doing something she shouldn't, she had a way of making it seem like nothing was ever really her fault. But this time, she had made a mistake. This time, she had forgotten the one thing she couldn't rewrite: proof. That voicemail sitting in my phone, barely a few seconds long, was all the evidence I needed. Jessica's voice, recorded mid-laughter, mid-flirtation, telling another guy she wasn't really seeing anyone serious. Her own words, contradicting everything she had told people. I had held on to that recording without knowing what to do with it. At first, I convinced myself that I didn't need to use it. I had already walked away. I had already cut her out of my life. I thought I could let it go, that it didn't matter what she told people, that I didn't owe her, or anyone else, an explanation. But then I started hearing things. Jessica wasn't just trying to move on. She was trying to rewrite history. She had told people that I had cheated on her, that I had been the one sneaking around behind her back, that I had left her out of nowhere and refused to give her an explanation. The way she told it, she had been blindsided, heartbroken, left trying to understand what she had done wrong. And the worst part? Some people believed her. Mutual friends started acting differently around me. Some stopped talking to me entirely. Others reached out, awkwardly asking if I was okay, as if they weren't sure whether to believe Jessica or not. I overheard rumors, things I had never done, lies Jessica had fabricated out of thin air, all designed to make me look like the bad guy. Jessica wasn't just trying to protect herself. She was trying to destroy me. And that was when I realized I wasn't going to let her. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to yell or argue or waste my energy trying to prove anything to her directly. But I wasn't going to let her lies go unchecked. I sent the voicemail to a few close friends, the ones who had been unsure, the ones who had distanced themselves because they didn't know which side to take. I didn't add any commentary. I didn't try to explain, just the message itself, attached to a single text. If you've heard Jessica's version of what happened, I think you should hear this too. It didn't take long for the truth to spread. Jessica had spent weeks making sure her story was the one people believed. But now, her own voice had exposed her. The same people she had lied to, manipulated, and played the victim for were the ones calling her out, questioning everything she had said. Her carefully crafted story fell apart in an instant. The messages started soon after. Jessica was furious. At first, she tried to act like she was hurt, like she couldn't believe I would do something so cruel as to share a private conversation. But when that didn't work, she turned to anger. She accused me of trying to ruin her life, of turning people against her, of humiliating her. She acted like I had betrayed her, as if exposing the truth was somehow worse than what she had actually done. I didn't respond. Jessica had spent years controlling the way people saw her, carefully crafting a version of herself that could never be questioned. But for the first time, she had no control. She had no way to spin the story, no way to make herself look like the victim. And I knew that was killing her more than anything else. The messages continued for a few days, growing more desperate. When anger didn't get a response, she tried another tactic: apologies, long-winded explanations, attempts to convince me that she had just been confused. She said she had made a mistake, that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she had only been flirting that night because she was insecure and needed validation. She tried to convince me that she still loved me, that she still wanted to fix things, that we could put this behind us if I would just talk to her. But I had nothing to say. Jessica had spent so long believing she could get away with anything, that she could string me along indefinitely while keeping her options open. She had made me feel like I was the one who needed to fight for her attention, to prove my worth, to be grateful that she was with me at all. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. She had gambled with my trust, and she had lost. Eventually, the messages stopped. The rumors faded. People moved on, and so did I. The last time I heard anything about Jessica, she was dating someone new. Not the guy from the phone call, apparently, that had fizzled out almost immediately, but someone else. Another relationship, another fresh start, another chance for her to be the version of herself she wanted people to see. But I wasn't part of that world anymore. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the manipulation, the gaslighting, the constant effort it had taken to hold together something that had never been real in the first place. Jessica had always been the kind of person who needed control. She needed to be the center of attention, needed to make sure that no matter how things ended, she was never the one who lost. But this time, she had. She had played her games. She had made her choices. And she had lost the one thing she had always counted on: me. I never looked back.